So today we are back to the book On the Way to the Light. Julio unfortunately couldn't be with us today, so I prepared myself as best as I could. It's a very challenging passage of the book. I'm going to say it here up front that a lot of what we're going to find here today, it's very controversial, and we'll try to explain and we'll try to go over it very carefully, not to be accusing anyone or anything, but just trying to understand what Emmanuel brought to us. This is 1940, more or less. I think its book is even before 1940, I think 1939, something like that. And Emmanuel is bringing his interpretation from the spiritual world of humans' history, not according to scholars, but according to the view of the spiritual world. So a lot of things that we are going to see, especially today, may not sit well with what you think. And again, we are not going to enter into discussions of the truth or not, or the reality of what Emmanuel wrote, because I think none of us can really discuss it with the understanding of that Emmanuel had from the spiritual world and from the knowledge that he brings to us. So we will try to go over it, try to explain a little bit in historical terms, but not in questioning if this is true or not, because we have no way of really discussing in that aspect. So we are going to go more through the historical means of each passage. The chapter is chapter 14, The Rise of Christianity. I'm going to share the screen here with you. And we are on John's Apocalypse, the book of Revelation. The first thing before Zoraida starts reading that is important for us to know, Apocalypse in the original term means revelation in Greek, okay? Of course, probably because of this very passage of the gospel, we use the word apocalypse to signify the end of the world, of the end of something, of the final stage of something, right? But apocalypse, according to the old, it comes from the Greek, apocalypsis, meaning unveiling or revelation, okay? Yeah. Not in the sense of the end of the world. So this is from the New Testament, and John's Apocalypse is the last part of the Gospel of John. John the Apostle, that was the one that lived with Mary, the mother of Jesus, and took care of her after Jesus was crucified. So again, everything that we are going to read here are Emmanuel's interpretation of history, human history, according to his knowledge in the spiritual world. So let us start with it. Zoraida, please.
Okay. John's Apocalypse. A few years before the end of the first century, after the coming of the new doctrine, the powers of the spirit world made an analysis of the dreadful situation of the world in view of the future. Under Jesus' direction, they established new lines of progress for civilization. marking the initial characteristics of modern-day European countries. By then, Rome was for the invisible plane nothing more than an infectious spot that needed to be neutralized or removed altogether. All the endowments of heaven had been scorned by the imperial city, and it had become a Vesuvius of passions and excesses. The divine master called to the higher spheres the spirit John, who was still being held prisoner by the bonds of the earth. And the astonished, afflicted apostle read the symbolic language of the invisible world. The Lord told him to deliver his knowledge to the planet as a warning to all nations and peoples of the earth. In the old apostles of Patmos transmitted the extraordinary warnings of the apocalyptic to his disciples. All of the events posterior to John's life are foreseen therein. Certainly, the apostle's description frequently enters the obscurious terrain. One can plainly see that his human language could not faithfully replicate the divine expression of his visions of remarkable interest for the history of humankind. The wars, the future nations, the coming tribulations, the commercialism, the ideological struggles of Western civilization are all foreseen in minute detail. In its most dreadful image, which even today is still offered to the eyes of the modern world, is that of the deviant Church of Rome, symbolized as the beast clothed in purple and drunk on the blood of the saints.
Okay, see here that we already have some very heavy language. John was, according to Emmanuel, John the Apostle, he was called to the spiritual world in a dream or in a trance, and received the instructions to deliver this knowledge of what is called the Apocalypse. Now, this is so controversial, the Apocalypse, that not all Christian segments or different Christian sects believe and or accept it. So it's part of the New Testament, but the Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox Christians do not accept it. The Protestants have a literal interpretation of it, like they always do. And with it comes a lot of distortions on the interpretations of it. Because as Emmanuel says here, certainly the description frequently enters the obscure terrain. Human language could not faithfully replicate the divine expression of his visions of history of humankind. There are parts of the revelation here that we are more familiar, at least that we heard, the 4 horsemen of the Apocalypse, the beast of the Apocalypse, and so on and so forth. The outline of the Apocalypse is first the revelation of Jesus Christ that John receives through prophetic visions. And he's instructed to write all that he hears to the 7 churches of Asia at that time. So the 7 churches were Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. And he sends messages to all of them. So then there are the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the 7 spiritual figures, which is where we find the beast of the sea that we read, and then the 7 balls that are poured on earth. So all of these are predictions of things that are going to happen to earth if we do not, let's say, behave ourselves in a sense. But again, it's always important to remind ourselves that the free will that we have dictates our future. Nothing is written in stone. So anything that he predicted here can or may have happened, but our free will may have modified things that he predicted here. And again, scholars have gone through the study of the Revelation or the Apocalypse, and they have come with very different interpretations of it. And the scholars have been studying it until today, and they have very different interpretations of it. And again, we are not scholars. We are more interested in the study of Spiritism and the interpretations of Emmanuel. They are important to us for us to go through and understand, but we cannot discuss it as scholars or according to any of the different interpretations of the different religions, because we don't really understand their point of views, and we will have to study each of them. Okay, so let's read the next one, which is even more complicated to read and more heavy, but let's go there.
Okay. The identity of the beast of the Apocalypse. The Apocalypse states that the beast would say great and blasphemous things for 42 months, adding that his number would be 666. By examining the importance of symbols at that time and following a certain course of interpretations, we can take each month as being 30 years instead of 30 days. Hence, there is a period of 1260 years, which is precisely the period 610 and 1870 of our era, when the papacy was consolidated from the time of its appearance with the emperor Phocas in 607 to the decree of papal infallibility by Pius IX in 1870, which marked the decadence and absence of Vatican authority in light of humankind's scientific, philosophical, and religious evolution. As for the number 666, without referring to the interpretations using Greek numerals, but rather using the Roman numerals because they were the most widespread and well-known, we must keep in mind that the Supreme Pontiff of the Roman Church uses the titles, Vicarius.
Let me read it. Vicarius Generalis Dei in Terris, Vicarius Filii Dei, and Dix Cleri.
Which mean, respectfully, God's chief vicar on earth, vicar of the Son of God and captain of the clergy. All one needs is a little game of patience, adding up the Roman numerals found in each papal title, and one will find the same result of 666 in each one of them. Hence, one can see that John's Apocalypse has immense importance for earthly humankind's destiny.
Okay, so you can imagine how controversial is this, right?
Oh, wow.
But let's try to put a little bit of history here. First, we can see that Emmanuel is using 30 years instead of 30 days. So following a certain course of interpretation. He doesn't tell us what interpretation is that. So we have no way of discussing it, of arguing against or for, because this is Emmanuel's interpretation of it according to his knowledge in the spiritual world. What we do know is that according to history, in this Emperor Phocas in 607 was a terrible emperor, but the one thing that he did was to make the Pope an official title. Before that, you had different interpretations of papacy, and the popes were called, there are more than one pope, or at the same time, or different interpretations of what the pope was for. So this was the emperor that in 607 decided that the pope was the chief of the church and the sole ruler of the desires or interpretation of God's will on earth. So, and of God and Jesus that were one in the same according to their interpretation at that time. So from there to the decree of papal infallibility by Pius IX, which means that the Pope, everything that the Pope says is infallible, is the true words of God. That was decreed in 1870. But that was also when the Pope lost their authority in terms of political ruling. The Vatican slowly started to lose their political influence, and they became only the authority on the religious aspect of the church. So in 1929, the Vatican became an independent state inside Rome, protected by the Italian authorities, but with no political, scientific influence anymore. So as for the number 666, again, he already says here that using the Roman numerals, and we will find some interpretations that say that the number should be 616, not 666. So to say that the 666 represents the Pope and the Church, it's something that we really cannot argue against so forth, because we have no authority to do that, or no knowledge of that. I think we stay with the historical facts and what Emmanuel is telling here in terms of historical meaning. It has its logic in terms of history of the papacy, and I would like Soraya to read the last item, because I think that's what we need to stay with in this whole discussion.
Yes, the pathway of light and love. But let us return to our purpose and realize that the Gospels bear a marvelous divine light that the incessant flow of the centuries has only relit and made more alive. This is because they contain the epitome of all the compendiums of peace and truth for people's lives, and they comprise the pathway of light and love by which all souls may ascend towards the luminous mountains of the wisdom of heaven.
So Emmanuel finishes this chapter with a message of reminding us the importance of the Gospels and the teachings that the Gospels can bring to us, showing us the pathway to a more enlightened existence, the compendiums of peace and truth for people's lives. Now, we know that the interpretation of the Gospels throughout the times, the translations and mistranslations of the Gospels have modified it from the original words to the words that were useful and accommodating to peoples at different times. So we are very much in opposing of those that try to interpret the Gospels literally, because you cannot interpret a present translation, let's say, into English of something that was translated differently, 100 times. We know the difficulty of translation. This book was translated from Portuguese, and we know that Julio keeps correcting a lot of things that were mistranslated, and we can imagine that, you know, in people that will continue using this book will not see the translation mistakes, and if they translate from these to other languages, which is something that is being done with the books of Francisco Xavier, because of course the translations into English are the ones that other people in other countries, from Germany, to Finland, to other countries in Europe, are using it to make their own translations. You accumulate mistakes. Every translation makes mistakes. So to think that the Gospels, the language that we're reading the Gospels in present day English or Portuguese or any other language are really what was written 2,000 years ago is a little bit of lack of knowledge of human history and understanding of the process of translation. Okay, so I wanted to wait till the end of the chapter to open for comments and questions, because I wanted to have it all together. So now, if you have any comments, any questions, please feel free. You know, because this is the end of this chapter. We are going to move to the next one.
Okay.
I hope I didn't scare everybody.
No, you didn't. You explained it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So
actually, John.
Yes.
No, I think it must be mentioned that this is probably the best explanation I have heard regarding this particular chapter of this book. I think you did a great job.
Yeah.
Actually, I just lost my breath here. That's why I don't have any specific questions, but it's fantastic. Thank you so much.
No.
You know,
I just have to ask a question, which is, it's not, that
Sure.
666 stands for all those titles? That's what it means?
No, he said that if the Pope used those titles, and if you add the Roman numerals found in each papal title, the result will be 666. So because if each title corresponds to Roman numerals, right? The V, the I, the Roman numerals are
yes.
You know, the X. So if you add all of those, I haven't done that, and I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what Emmanuel says here, and I didn't think it was worth going into that. I don't think we are knowledgeable enough to try to understand that. So I just follow what Emmanuel said that, and I didn't.
Yeah, because
that's what he says.
Letters there, the Roman numerals, you know, have that, you know, the letters there that do not correspond to Roman numerals. That's my point.
Yes, but the titles are accompanied by numbers, by numerals. That's what he's saying, and I don't know that.
Oh.
That's what he's saying here. It's not that the names correspond to numerals. They say that the titles are accompanied by numbers, by numerals, and I don't know that.
Thanks. Okay, that was my kind of. I was confused with that.
Yeah.
But another question. Wasn't it in the 1870 when all this enlightenment came about? You know, the age of reasoning and logic, and that's when the church lost power control, no, because of the new era of enlightenment and industrial revolution.
Yes, and that's why Spiritism came in 1857, around that time, because humanity was prepared to receive something completely revolutionary in terms of knowledge. Exactly. Because we always joke that if Spiritism had appeared 100 years before, Kardec would be burned at stake, right? So
exactly.
And
it was the age of reason and logic. So Spiritism came
Yes.
at the era where it was supposed to have come. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud. I'm
Yes.
just
No, it's exactly that. And you know, we could go into the discussion here to this 1260 years from 1610 to 1870, which is the end of the church domination of politics and of scientific discoveries. Everything that, all the scientific discoveries before that time had to be approved by the church.
by the church.
Yes, so that's why where you have Galileo, Copernico, all imprisoned, persecuted because they brought discoveries that went against what the church believed at that time, and you know, science in the 1900 free itself from the domination of the church. And of course, when you go from one extreme, you go directly to the other extreme, which is what science did, which is to become completely materialistic, to become completely denying the existence of spirituality and God and everything. And Spiritism came to find middle ground.
Exactly,
between
middle ground.
Religion and science.
Makes sense.
That's what, yeah. Okay. So,
João,
we're going to continue. Yes.
I must admit, I totally did not understand what these paragraphs said. And what does the number 666 refer to as in your understanding?
The 666 is the number of the beast.
Right.
Is that what we call the devil?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Some people decided to call it the devil. It's an interpretation of the book of Revelation. That's where the origin of the beast, when in the book of Revelations or the Apocalypse of John, he mentions two different beasts. The beast that will come from the sea and the beast that comes from the earth. Let me find it here exactly where is, yeah, a beast with 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 crowns on his horns, and on his heads names of blasphemy emerges from the sea. People of the world would wonder and follow the beast. The dragon grants him power and authority for 42 months. The beast of the sea blasphemes God's name, wages war against the saints, and overcomes them. Then a beast emerges from the earth, having 2 horns like a lamb, speaking like a dragon. He directs people to make an image of the beast of the sea, who was wounded yet lives, breathing life into it, and forcing all people to bear the mark of the beast, 666, events leading into the third woe. Okay, now you have it, Philip. That's where the number 666 came from the beast. And again, throughout 2,000 years, you have 1,000 different interpretations of it, but that's originally how the beast became the devil or demon or whatever you want to call it.
But John,
yes,
I don't know if Philip has finished, but well, after those questions, I want to test my interpretation. My executive summary from this chapter is that Emmanuel is sharing with us his particular interpretation, and he's essentially saying that John's prediction on the apocalypse had to do with characterizing this particular period in the future that would come, It's essentially the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages as his interpretation of what would the apocalypse, that was the apocalypse that would happen. And characterizing the Catholic Church and the papacy and everything else as, you know, the actually occurrence of that. And at the same time, in the end, he is preserving the scripture, the Gospels. So essentially here, he's heavily criticizing or not criticizing, but he is assigning to John's prediction of this bad prediction of the apocalypse, the whole the Middle Ages on the hands of the church as a bad thing, but it's not, you know, a fault of the scriptures. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what he wanted to convey here. I agree with you. At this last chapter, that's why I want to read to the end, because what he's saying here is and again, for those that joined a little bit later, the first thing I said, apocalypse comes from the word Greek, means revelation, okay? It's not the end of the world, it's revelation. Yeah. And Emmanuel, yes, I agree with you. He wants to preserve, he gives his interpretation of the apocalypse. And again, it's very difficult for us to argue for or against. It's his interpretation. You know, we can start discussing different interpretations here and we'll be till the end of times discussing interpretations. But you know, the important thing, I agree with you, is the importance of the Gospels. It's the companions of peace and truth for people's lives that will lead them to an evolution if you use them in a intelligent way, right? That's what also what is important to understand. That's why I went over the problem of translations, because it's very easy for us to get lost in the words that we are not sure are really what the words that the original apostles or the evangelist, the ones that wrote the Gospels, I forgot the word now. So, but that's yeah, that's basically it. Philip, okay now?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Okay, so I'll leave for you to study more. You know, go research that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I cannot really add much more. When Julio told me he was not coming today, I went to study this chapter because I knew it was hard. He already told me last month this is going to be a very hard one, and then he jumped ship. So
I applaud his wisdom.
But João, after all this, I think it's important to point out two things. First, we must never forget that when a spirit tells something to us, even a very admired and respected spirit, we always must analyze it because it's his opinion. And we must use it and think about it and reason and build our vision of the universe, adding that to our learning. So it's not, you know, the expression of the absolute truth, something we hear from a spirit, even when we admire. And the second thing that for me is very interesting is that he's preserving the Gospels. It would be so easy at this point to say, hey guys, the thing was totally distorted and you can forget about it or something else. But no, he's preserving the Gospels. And I find that very interesting.
I agree with you. I agree completely. I think that, you know, and it's very, in 6 lines, he preserves the gospel in a beautiful way, you know, and the title is The Pathway of Light and Love. He says everything there, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go to the growth of Christianity. It's going to get better, but not much. Let me tell you in advance.
It is. Okay.
Sure.
The growth of Christianity, grievous Roman depths. The spiritual forces tried in vain to use the Romans for the supreme guidance of the world. Every resource possible was fruitlessly lavished upon the imperial city. The challenging of immense material wealth, which made the consolidation of a sole, unified state on the planet possible, had not been forgotten, nor had all the measures that were necessary from the moral point of view. The extraordinary wisdom of Athens, and the collaboration of all the experiences of the vanquished peoples have been transplanted in Rome to no avail. The incarnated spirits were unable to eliminate the hateful cords of vanity and ambition, and betrayed by these sentiments, they acquired grievous depths before the tribunals of divine justice. The coming of the Christ to the dark stage of the planet to bring the luminous message of truth and love had marked the period of humankind's spiritual adulthood. This adulthood entailed rights, which in turn would be accompanied by increased responsibilities and duties for solving the great educational problems of the heart. While physical humankind broadened its horizons in the rims of material progress, the gospel was brought to spiritual humankind a course of new endeavors, educating it suitably for the intrepid conquest of science and liberty in the future. This educational process was supposed to be carried out by the capital of the world in accordance with the designs of the spirit realm. However, heavy powers of the darkness had joined forces with the strongest tendencies of terrestrial human beings, who were constantly predisposed to the cords of evil that held them to the earth and bound to the coarsiest instincts of preservation. And while the selfless spirits on high wept over the Romans' abuses of liberty, the city of the Caesars became drunker and drunker on the wine of hatred and ambition, contracting grievous depths by intertwining their sentiments with the hatred of the vanquished and humiliated, thus creating a grim outlook for the distant future.
So, what
So
Emmanuel is
poetic.
telling us, yes, is that we had a wonderful opportunity of when we became adults in the time of the Roman Empire, and we wasted our opportunity. What he's telling us is that the coming of the Christ was the passage of humankind from infancy to adulthood, spiritual adulthood. And with that, we had rights and responsibilities. And basically, we abused of our rights. We didn't face our responsibilities the way we should, and that caused all the problems that we're going to see from here to the end of this book. It's important to remind ourselves of what was Rome at the time. He says that Rome was the capital of the world, and he's right in the sense that Rome, the Roman Empire, dominated the whole known world at that time. So the globalization that we talk so much today was already a reality in the time of the Roman Empire.
True. Very good. Yeah.
Yes,
That's true.
and
good.
actually, that was what allowed Paul of Tarsus to travel throughout the empire without any problem, because he was a Roman citizen. So he didn't need to be. He could travel throughout the empire without being stopped or without being prevented from move from one place to another, because it was all Roman Empire. So one of the main reasons of the expansion of Christianity in the time of the Roman Empire was exactly because the Roman Empire was the whole world, in a sense, whole known world at the time.
Yeah.
So the thing is, the Romans stole, in a sense, everything from Athens, who had learned, and it's not said that Athens stole from the Egyptians, but they learned a lot and they used a lot from the Egyptians. So the Roman Empire was a culmination of millennia of knowledge acquired in the ancient civilizations that were all brought to Rome through the vanquished people. Now, what Rome was supposed to do with it is to use the knowledge and the progress for the benefit of all. And instead, of course, we are all humans, imperfect humans, and we take advantage of the possessions we had to use to our own benefits and to persecute others. And on that path, the Roman Empire ended up collapsing. And remember what Julio likes to say here also: empires collapse from within, not from external pressure. You end up, an empire end up corrupting itself from within, meaning you start to destroy itself from the entails of the government, and from that you become exposed to external attacks, and you end up being destroyed or conquered. And that's exactly what happened to the Roman Empire. And if you study history and you look at how the fall of the Roman Empire, you see that it became with this, as it said here, the city of the Caesars became drunker and drunker on the wine of hatred and ambition, very poetic. But that's what really happened in reality, right? And again, we can only try to learn, but for those that don't learn from history, you are bound to repeat it, as they say, right? So we've been trying to learn and committing a lot of the same mistakes all over and over again. The fact that we become spiritually adults do not mean that we become wiser, in a sense, right? We see many adults committing many mistakes that sometimes are even worse than children's mistakes. And we, as humankind in our adulthood, we are still struggling with a lot of our inferior tendencies. Okay? Any comments here? Nope.
No, just a comment that I remember back in history class that I heard that when Rome conquered Greece, actually Greece conquered Rome because of all the education, the cultural center, even the religion itself, they changed the names of all those gods. But it was actually, when they conquered Greece, the Greece conquered Rome. Culturally speaking, I'm talking about.
Yeah, one thing that, they when they say they stole everything from Athens, it's not stole in the sense of, they stole a lot of physical material things also, but they stole the concepts, and they stole the concepts, the ideas, the learning, everything they took with them. So you have all the gods in ancient Rome are really the gods from the Greek civilization, right? They just changed the names.
The Greeks
used their own names. But one thing very important about the Roman Empire that it's always important to remind, and some of you have heard this before from Julio, from us, is that what the Romans did very well was they invaded the regions, conquered the regions, but they did not impose their own religion, their own customs. They respected as long as they paid the tributes, as they paid the taxes, the rest, they could keep living on their own. So for instance, and then later it changed, because when they started needing more money, they started forcing people, the conquered to change because they wanted to impose. But in the build of the Roman Empire, they would leave the conquered people to continue having their own religious beliefs, their own customs, and you see a lot of that in the Jewish civilization, right? That they had the synagogues, they had they continue following their traditions, and the Romans were there. They had a representative that made sure that they respect the Roman Empire in the sense of paying taxes, and that was always the cause for the revolts. And they would, they would find tax collectors among the people that were conquered, because instead of forcing their own debt collectors, they got like Judah, right? He was a tax collector from the Jewish people, and that in that case, in that way, the conflicts that they left were internal conflicts for them. They would not interfere in their internal conflicts, and the crucifixion of Jesus is one of Pontius Pilatus did not want to interfere with what the Jewish decided. So Jesus was condemned by the Jewish, and Pontius Pilatus washed his hands, in a sense, meaning that he was following the instructions from the Roman Empire. Do not interfere in the local issues that do not affect the Roman Empire. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Let's go on.
Spiritual humankind's wrongdoings and dolorous redemptions. The pain-filled prayers of all the workers in Jesus' blessed saw and feel reach his merciful heart. His discerning gaze, however, had pierced the core of people's souls, and it was not without good reason that he recommended letting the wheat and tares grow together in the same furrows, leaving it to him to separate them at harvest time. The limited freedom of action of individuals and collectivities is always fully respected. All are responsible for their deeds, and they receive accordingly. That is why Rome was given the chance to accomplish its political purposes and designs, but divine justice accompanied it throughout the course of its aberrations that forever compromised the future of spiritual humankind, which only now will undergo a readjustment in the bitter transitions of the 20th century. A heavy and awful cord bound the victorious city to the peoples it humiliated. The hatred of the vanquisher and its enemies melted into centuries of expiatory trials and struggles in order to show that Jesus is the foundation of the truth, and that only love is a sacred purpose of life. Thus, conqueror and conquered, united by the hatred like slaves shackled to each order in the galleys of bitterness, appeared periodically in the spirit world before the supreme mercy of the Son of God to promise mutual reparation and redemption in the centuries to come, founding Western civilization as the blessed workshop for their new endeavors in the effort of fraternity and regeneration. The Master's goodness enabled very glorious and progressive cities to flourish, along with enlightened, prosperous countries where fallen souls could find all the elements they needed for spiritual growth. The physical human continue the ascending line of its evolution and conquest and discoveries, but with the transcendent human, the immortal being, be able to leave the sea of slime in which it had willingly immersed itself for 2 millennia. let the disquieting expectations of the present time answer for us. Yeah.
So, what Emmanuel is saying here is that we have our free will, limited freedom of action. Why he say limited? Because our free will grows according to our knowledge and our understanding. We cannot have free will on something we don't know or don't understand. So the free will is something that develops as we progress. So that's why he said limited freedom of action, but is always fully respected. Again, cause and consequence. That's the natural law, the law of cause and effect, of cause and consequence. All are responsible for their deeds and they receive accordingly. And that applies also to not only to individuals, but to collectivities, as he says here. So the countries or the people of a certain region, they acquire what we can call a karma for their actions. And they will have to face the consequences of it. So Rome had the opportunity as the capital of the world at that time to lead humankind to progress. But unfortunately, it failed in different parts of it. Again, we cannot say that it completely failed, because a lot of Roman progresses are still used to this day and served as foundations of knowledge that were built later. But if we analyze human history, the end of the Roman Empire was the beginning of the Dark Ages, which lasted 1,000 years. So 1,000 years of human civilization where very little progress was achieved. We know from Spiritism that we are always progressing, that we are always moving forward. But the speed of the progress depends on our own free will, and our respect, and the divinity respects our free will. So the Roman Empire was responsible for a lot of progresses and a lot of achievements that we had, but was also responsible for 1,000 years of dark ages that follow it. And that dark ages was a period of atonement for a lot of those that commit the mistakes of the Roman Empire. You come to a new incarnation to repair, slowly repair, through several incarnations, all the mistakes that we made. And we are we've been built like this and evolve like this. The end of the Dark Ages, a little bit of history, the one, as I said before, the main responsible for the end of the Dark Ages was the Black Plague. The Black Plague killed 2/3 of the population of Europe and ended the feudal system, and that was what controlled the whole Europe of the Dark Ages, and allowed the Renaissance to start in the 15th century, 16th century, the centuries of the discoveries and the progress that came with it. So would history be different if the Romans had followed a different path? We can only speculate. What we know is that we are still facing the consequences of the mistakes we made 2,000 years ago. We say humankind. When Emmanuel says here that we will undergo a readjustment in the bitter transitions of the 20th century, we know that the 20th century marked a very strong progress of humankind in scientific terms. We are, if we look back 200 years ago, we see a lot of progress that was made in the last 200 years, which is the path, as Spiritism teaches us, from a world of trials and atonements to a world of regeneration. Some say that we are already in a world of regeneration. Some say that we are in the middle of the transition or the beginning of the transition. I remember our dear Nestor Mazzotti, the president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, when he told us, just look around in the world and you see that some countries are already countries of regeneration. Other countries are still countries of trials and atonements. So the world is going into a world of regeneration. And you know, we normally use the example of the Scandinavian countries, right? Sweden 200 years ago was a barbarous country, and now it's a country that is very one of the most advanced countries in the world. So it only took 200 years, and everybody is going to follow. And also a phrase that I like very much from Godinho, which is the actual president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation. He says, at 10 past 12 is already a new day, but it's very dark. So the world of regeneration is already here, but we cannot see because it's very dark by everything that is happening around us.
I like that. Very good. I love it.
Yeah,
very good.
I like that also.
Who said that? Who said that?
Jorge Godinho is the Jorge Godinho, the president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation.
Wow, very good.
When we were discussing the world of asking if is the world of regeneration already here, and he said, you know, 10 past 12 is already a new day, but it's still very dark. So, yeah.
I like that. Beautiful.
Okay. All right.
Johnny.
Yes.
Your last comment was great, and between the lines of the book, actually, in this part, not only in the Occidental world, there was little evolution along those 1,500 years, let's say, but also in other ancient civilizations in the world. When talking about the Chinese civilization, Emmanuel stopped in Confucius. My understanding is that, you know, along those 2,000 years, nothing really very interesting happened in terms of moral evolution. I'm pretty sure the same could be said about India, another ancient civilization that until the other day, or actually till today, has that so strong caste system still built in its fabric. So this vision of slow evolution, I think, is worldwide, not only Occidental, not only Roman related. You explained very well the causal relation with Rome, but in other civilizations in the world, it didn't happen either, right?
I agree. I fully agree with you. It's just that because we know less about them, it's more difficult to discuss. But, you know, again, speculating, if they had continued progressing, they would be dominating the world in a sense intellectually nowadays, right? Any civilization, Indian, Chinese, Egyptian, any civilization that had continued progressing like they were progressing in the ancient times, of course they would be dominating the world intellectually, not conquering in the sense of dominating, you know, militarily. But so I agree with you.
And morally, not only intellectually, but morally as well.
Morally, yes, definitely. Yeah, but again, we know little of their history, and you go to for those that have been to Egypt today, and you see how great it was and how not great it is today, it's really a contrast, right? You know, I remember when we went there, Jussara looked at the people there and said, this is not the reincarnation of the ancient Egypt. This is a completely new civilization, let's say.
Yeah.
Yes,
according to Haroldo Dutra Dias, one of his speech, he said God sent to Egypt, China, Indian, the message, and even for us, but it wasn't shared. They kept with them. As the same way that the Roman Empire didn't interfere in another religion. That's the way that they fail as well. So, yeah. And you still work on it and suffering because you don't share. Yeah. If Roman Empire should interfere, say no, now it's going to be like this, would be avoid a lot of stuff, a lot of dark period that you've been going through. Don't you think so?
You know, we're going back to Jesus, to not hide the candle under the bushel, right? Yes, that's what we did throughout civilizations. All the knowledge was in many civilizations, the knowledge was restricted to some of the wise, and of course this was a missed opportunity for humankind. But again, not all of it, and a lot of it we use it, and I think I think that the respect that the Romans had for each conquered civilization was actually a positive thing in the sense that preserve their traditions, because if you destroy the traditions, you destroy the population. You see throughout history some civilizations that were destroyed and that we know very little about them. The Essenes, for instance, at the time of Jesus, that they said that Jesus spent some time with the Essenes, they were massacred. And we lost every knowledge that we had from the Essenes and about the Essenes. And that was not only them, other civilizations that were destroyed, we lost their knowledge. And we may, even the Egyptian civilization, until today, we're trying to find out how they built the pyramids. And we still do not have a clear answer of how they built. We have theories, and some theories that made sense and some crazy theories about aliens. But we don't have a complete understanding of how they built the pyramids. So this was lost because of destructions of, the burning of Alexandria, the Library of Alexandria, one of the biggest crimes against humanity committed by, and it was, I'm not sure if it was the Romans, right, that burned it, or if it was, I don't remember exactly who was the barbarians, the Romans. And you imagine how much, with all that we have preserved, I'm sure it's like, 5, 2, 3% of the human knowledge that we had throughout times, that we're still struggling to find more knowledge. So difficult to say. Again, it's our speculation here, but I'm sure that you are right in terms of a lot of these that were hidden, knowledge that was hidden and ended up being lost for us, for incarnated ones. Remember that all the knowledge is still preserved in the spiritual world. It's just a matter of going back there and having the ability to access it. But yes, and it for us here incarnated, it's a lot of information that and opportunities lost.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, John.
Okay, the martyrs.
Okay, the martyrs. Before spreading Christian ideas in the midst of Roman society, Jesus' agents were already preparing to aid the missionaries of the faith, knowing full well the patricians' reaction to the new doctrines postulates of fraternity. The wealthiest classes could not tolerate such principles of equality as those professed in the lessons of the Nazarene. They considered them to be postulates of moral cowardice incompatible with the proud philosophy of the empire. Hence, Christians suffered the martyrdoms of the first persecution, which began during Nero's reign and which still holds such glorious and horrific memories. No instrument of torture was spared in testing the faith and consistency of those resigned, heroic souls. The whip, the cross, the rack, the claws of the lion, the fire, and the lions of the arenas. Nothing was spared to effectively persecute the Nazarene carpenter's followers. Peter and Paul surrendered their lives during the sanctifying martyrdoms, and from Nero to Diocletian, a heavy cloud of blood and tears enveloped the Christian soul, full of trust in the divine providence. Even Marcus Aurelius, whose elevated spiritual stature had received from the higher realms the mission of stopping such madness, could not deter the current of dark forces, but the blood of the Christians was the sap of life shed on the divine seeds of the Lamb, and their sacrifices were the reflections of the loving vibration of Christ's teaching, traversing the centuries to be understood and practiced for millenniums to come.
Okay, so here we go back to the first Christians. So Emmanuel was moving forward with the Christianity and the Roman Empire. Now he brought us back to the very beginning of Christianity, the martyrs. The persecution of the Christians, actually, if you read Paul and Stephen, again, one of the greatest books of the Spiritist literature, a book that should be read more than once, you see that the persecution of the Christians began in the very beginning when they started making some noise amongst the Jewish community. The Romans were not even concerned or aware that there was this small sect in Judea that was starting to spread and disseminate the teachings of a prophet, as they used to say, of a missionary. So in the beginning, the persecution was done by the Jewish, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the sects that wanted to protect the Jewish beliefs through their original traditions, that could not accept that the Messiah that they were waiting for, and some of them are still waiting to come, would have already come and sacrificed by them. So when we talk about the martyrs of Christianity, we think about the Romans persecuting them. But for the Romans, it started later. Paul of Tarsus, when he went to Rome, he also spent some time in a prison there, and then he was freed, and many years he was waiting for the judgment of his case. And it was at the time that Nero took over is that the persecution started. What happened was that Nero wanted to rebuild Rome, because Rome was very difficult to move around. It was a very antiquated city in a sense. So Nero had his has his ideas of building a new Rome. So he decided to burn a small part where he wanted to open something, according to historians, to rebuild. And the fire got out of control and burn the whole city. And of course, instead of accepting the blame, he would never do that. He was the emperor, and he was God on earth. He had to find someone to blame. And there was this movement that was very new in Rome, of people that were spreading principles of equality, that we are all the same, that didn't sit very well with the dominant class in Rome. So he decided to blame the Christians for it. And that's where the persecution started, and a persecution that would extend for more than 200 years. So the first martyrs that were, and the other interesting fact, you hear a lot about the Christians meeting in the catacombs, right? So the original meeting, when they were persecuted, they met in the catacombs. The people of that time, they were afraid of the burial sites, so they would not enter into the catacombs. That's why the Christians decided to have their meetings in the catacombs, until they were finally persecuted also there. Also, the Colosseum was not used to burn Christians. The Foro Romano was the place where the Christians were burned. The Colosseum was used, it was actually built later, and it was used for fights and things. Of course, Christians were sacrificed there in fights with beasts, but not in the sense that they were sacrificed through fire and all. The collective sacrifices of Christians was done not in the Colosseum, but in the Foro Romano, Roman Forum. Okay? So, as Emmanuel says here, even a later emperor, Marcus Aurelius, that was a more elevated spirit and came with the mission to stop the bloodshed. He was not able to do it because, again, you reach a point when society is so ingrained in doing something in its own way that it's very difficult, even for an emperor at that time, to modify it. So you just have to, if you think of slavery here in this country, right? Slavery was abolished in 1865. It continued to exist in Texas for another couple of years until they were finally freed. They never, according to what they said in Texas at that time, they never received the official confirmation that slavery was abolished. So they continue practicing slavery. So you can imagine that in Rome at that time, at a very vast empire, the persecution of the Christians would continue, because even if you come with the official prohibition that actually only came in 313, I believe, it's you see that it's not easy to stop the madness, let's say. Any comments here?
Johnny, you just mentioned the book that all spirits should read. What's the book?
Paul and Stephen.
Yes.
The story of Paul of Tarsus. A book by Emmanuel, one of the first books of Emmanuel. It's a must read. It's a book that for those interested in history and in spiritual evolution of Paul, and the story of Paul, and why he's so important to Christianity, and how someone that is driven can bring us to such an advancement. They say that Christianity exists only because of him, and if you read the book, you understand better why it is said that. It's really a 600-page book that it's worth every page of it. Okay.
Yeah.
So the next item called the apologists. Again, let's go back to the really meaning of apologists, right? They are not the ones apologizing, excusing themselves for anything. Apologists here is the ones that defend a theory or something. So they're ones that defend Christianity throughout times. They existed from the beginning, and they still exist today. For all those modern writers that write to defend different aspects of Christianity as a whole, they are still called the apologists. Okay?
Okay. The apologists. Ironically, the Christian doctrine had found in the persecutions its best resources for publicity and expansion. Its benevolent principles were finding refuge in all hearts, appealing to the conscience of all thinkers of free and sincere soul. Its influence was made apparent in the 2nd century in nearly all areas of the intellectual activity, and it had a large impact on legislation and customs. Tertullian presented his apology, causing widespread wonder and respect. Clement of Alexandria and Origen appeared with their authoritative words to defend the Christian philosophy. Along with them, a veritable host of voices arose that advocated the cause of truth, justice, and redemption, and love.
Okay, so first, apology comes from Greek and means verbal defense, speech in defense, okay? Tertullian was one of the first apologists, and it's a branch of Christian theology that defends Christianity against objections, okay? And you have Tertullian was the first one, but actually Origen is considered one of the most important theologians. He wrote more than 2,000 treatises of multiple branches of theology. He wrote textual criticism, biblical exegesis, and biblical hermeneutics. And if you want to research more, the studies of principles of interpretation concerning the books of the Bible. So they are those that defend Christianity, defend the Gospels, and defend the Christian philosophy. They exist from the beginning of times, and they exist till today. They are scholars. Sometimes they're not even religious, and actually those that are not religious are more interesting to read because they are apologists that defends on the basis of what's written there and what's taught there, not on the blind faith that some will have. So it's very interesting that they existed throughout times, and in the beginning, when Emmanuel says, ironically, the Christian doctrine had found in the persecutions its best resources for publicity and expansion, you only have to forbid something for it to grow. We know throughout history, and it's interesting, for instance, that, in the country that, after Brazil, the country that has more spiritist centers in the world is Cuba. Again, we cannot call them really true spiritist centers because there is a lot of deviations, but there are more than 500 spiritist centers in Cuba that follow different beliefs.
Wow.
And why is that? Persecution, right? Persecution of religious beliefs. I know that you guys that know Puerto Rico well know that there is what they call Santeria in Puerto Rico, right? And a lot of the spiritist centers in Cuba are more of Santeria centers than spiritist centers. But it's interesting, right? It shows that the number of, that the persecution is what sometimes it's the best resource for publicity. Even in the beginning of Spiritism, what called the attention of Spiritism a lot was the burning of the books in Barcelona, in the Archbishop of Barcelona ordered the burning of thousands of Spiritist books that were sent to Spain to disseminate Spiritism, and that called the attention of to Spiritism to many that never heard of it, because if they are burning something there must be something interesting. So let me try to find out what they are trying to hide. You know, natural human curiosity. So persecutions will always just reinforce what you are persecuting. You forbid, and that's where it grows. Okay. Let's read one more, and then we stop before Constantine, because the Constantine, there's a lot to discuss there.
Okay. Fasting and prayer. At first, Christians did not have a vision of the field of work that had been given to them. They did not grasp the fact that if fasting and prayer were a great virtue in solitude, they would even more so when used against the whirlwind of the unbridled passions and regenerative struggles. They did not immediately understand that, more than anything else, these evangelical precepts meant sacrificing oneself for one's neighbor, perseverance in the redemptive effort, and serenity in active labor, which all correct and edify at the same time. Withdrawing to a monastic life, they populated the deserts, believing that they could more quickly redeem themselves for the Lamb. A longing to flee the populous cities animated all believers, giving origin to the errors of the medieval era, when people thought they could find the antechambers of heaven in monasteries. The East, with its many deserts and sacred places, was the pathway for all who wanted to escape the lyre of the passions. At one point, the large mountain of the Nitria alone held 30,000 anchorites exiled from the world and its deadly pleasures. Nevertheless, upon examining that ill-advised decision of those early times, we must remember that Christians have forgotten that Jesus did not desire the death of the sinner.
You know, it's very interesting. What Emmanuel is saying here is that, of course, we misinterpreted the messages of Jesus, like we have done many times and are still doing, because many of the early Christians, after a certain time, interpret that to isolate themselves or to fast and to live in prayer was the best way to reach heaven. When Jesus told us that helping your neighbor is the best way to progress. Before going to the altar, go and reconcile with your enemy. That's what Jesus taught us. So throughout times, we continue to do that. We still have a lot of Christians that isolate themselves, thinking that way they are going to get closer to heaven, closer to Jesus, but running away from the problems and running away from difficulties do not solve the problems or the difficulties. We are just really running away. So for us to progress, both morally and intellectually, we need to live amongst our brothers and sisters. So Emmanuel is saying here that external actions are not what's going to make us progress. And we still see so many religions, and actually basically all of them, that use external acts as a way to redeem themselves, to promote redemption of oneself, and to promote the saving yourself from your sins. And we know that only inner transformation is what's going to make us progress and changing ourselves. And without going back to the one of the bases of Spiritism. Without charity, there is no salvation. We cannot do charity to ourselves only. We need to do charity to others. Charity, love in action. So we need to act. We need to go and be helpful to others. So what Emmanuel is telling us here is that the misconception of isolating ourselves in monasteries, in mountains, running away from society, it's not going to help us progress in any sense. Okay? Any comments? Final comments? Okay. Thank you all for hanging with me today on this very challenging subject.
Very nice. I love it.
I hope you. I hope at least you know arose your curiosity to study and research a little more, because it's a lot of information that Emmanuel gave us that really merits investigating it a little bit more, studying a little bit more, because we are only going to learn and to achieve more progress, intellectual, and even more progress with this. Okay?
I thank you for the discussion. It's opened up more paths for learning, and we'll probably come back to you asking for references.
Yes, please do. You can ask.
Thank you, because you step up to the plate, Joel. You step up to the plate too. And you did a good, yes, you did a good job. You did a good job.
Yeah.
You step up to the plate with, with subjects so difficult.
When these things fall on your lap, it's good. Sometimes you have to go and study, right? It's always an opportunity. And Luis knows that. He's been studying a lot of this for his classes. And, these opportunities makes you go after the sources and so, yeah. So, anyways, what we have next Sunday, we are going to have Elmo giving us a lecture. We're going to continue our fundamentals of mediumship, the series of lecture studies that we're doing, and we came to physical manifestations. So all of you that are interested in poltergeist, in tables moving, and all these things, how does it work, and why does it happen, and why less and less we hear and see about them, except on horror movies. You can watch Elmo's lecture next Sunday, okay? 11 a.m.
Interesting.
Thank you all, and we're going to ask Carol to do our final prayer. Carol, thanks.
Thank you, João.
Thank you, John. Thank you so
Elmo's
much.
lecture will be on Zoom or YouTube?
On Zoom. Yeah, on Zoom. Regular Zoom. Yeah. I'm going to, for the first time, I'm going to put it live on YouTube and Facebook if possible, but I haven't studied that yet. But it'll be here on our regular Zoom meeting. Okay.
Thank you again. Infinite Creator, Supreme Intelligence, all goodness and grace, we are truly blessed for our lessons today, our lessons that we can be together to share, to deepen our understanding of Spiritism, the lessons of early Christianity, and our continuation of our studies in a very in-depth way. We are truly grateful for what we have received today, and may we learn more as we go and study more deeply. We are truly grateful for the spiritual benefactors, the good spirits, the ones who are with us today, our guides, our guardian angels, who are helping us, assisting us each day. May we continue to be blessed as we do our part and as we share our studies with others. May we learn from what we have received today and put into practice and study more intently with the details. We are blessed, and may we continue with our studies, with our mindfulness, with our prayers, and our focus throughout the week to be of service, to bring love and light to the forefront, to share with our family, with our friends, with our others, with our co-workers. We are truly blessed. May we receive the blessings of the gospel teachings of Spiritism and the love and light of Christ to be bestowed upon us through our hearts and through our minds. May we go forth in safety and protection, and may we ask for greater blessings for all those who are in need, those who are suffering right now in the pandemic. May we be a beacon of light to others. May we go forth now in peace. So be it.